Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's my pleasure to be here, especially if it's South Asia, and it's we have a topic very dear to my heart, which is women's rights in food and agriculture. My input will really focus on rural women, particularly small and landless women farmers and women agriculture workers in South Asia, and to be honest, more on Pakistan. So once we look at the socioeconomic and political factors affecting women, food and agriculture policies in the region are of paramount importance. So most of my talk today will look at the policies that our governments across South Asia are implementing in the agriculture sector, and where is the drive for these policies are coming from. I think India has been a beacon in the past year and a half, especially with respect to farmers' rights and farmers' resistance. And the very resistance that happened in India is a key factor in understanding that agriculture now is really dictated by semi-colonial, semi-feudal tendencies. So let me talk about, first of all, three overarching systems of exploitation and oppression that are faced by women. And most of us know them very well. It's feudalism, it's patriarchy, and then capitalism. Though I think in the era in which we are living now, it would be better to call it imperialism instead of capitalism. To highlight feudal or semi-feudal characteristics of a society, let me share some data from the government of Pakistan. According to the government of Pakistan, uh, the uh, the agricultural land distribution in Pakistan is highly skewed, as only 5% of the agriculture households own 64% of farmland. On the other side, over 80% of farmers own less than 5 acres of land, and women's share of ownership of land is less than 2%. I think if we are honest, this is not only typical of Pakistan. Similar data would be coming from India and Bangladesh and Nepal and other South Asian countries. So that is where we see that the power of the feudal landlords has stayed, even though we talked about so-called independence from colonial forces in 1947. In essence, I think it would be more appropriate to say that one form of oppression was taken over by another form of oppression and exploitation. And it was really not independence, it was more just transfer of power from one hand to the other. Now, according to the State of the Food Security and Nutrition in 2021, it has been stated that globally there is a failure to progress towards achieving sustainable development goals that pertain to ensuring access to safe and nutritious food and sufficient food for people all around the year, as well as eradicating all forms of malnutrition. Further, between 720 and 811 million people in the world face hunger in 2020. As many as 161 million people faced hunger in 2019, and nearly 2.37 billion people did not have access to adequate food in 2020. And there is an increase of 320 million people in just 1 year. A majority of the people who face hunger are from Asia, and we all know that most of them are from South Asia. Why? Why, when we have such vast lands, we have such wonderful environmental zones, eco zones for food production, we have produced food abundantly. Pakistan is one of the top milk producers, one of the top livestock producers, cotton, and so on, and so is India. Why are we facing such acute hunger and malnutrition? And I think that is what needs to be really looked at if we want to talk about rights, farmers' rights, especially women's rights. We know that semi-feudal, and as I said, with land in the hands of very few households, very few powerful feudal households, we know that semi-feudal and patriarchal norms have consistently controlled women's economic, social, and political lives. A vast majority of rural communities are basically landless farmers as well as agriculture workers. Mechanization and digital technology has led to extreme loss of livelihood. And it means that rural communities are basically workers or semi-proletariats who go from one work to another based on what is available. I just came back from Punjab 2 days ago, and we find that people are jumping from rice cultivation to cotton picking, from cotton picking to potato harvesting, and so on and so on. Whatever is available in whichever region. In Rahimia Khan in Pakistan, we found that entire bunch of villages, the entire community from those villages migrate to another part about maybe 2 to 3 hours away from where they are living to go for cotton picking. Because there's no cotton in their area, there's only sugarcane. And so we know that it's not only that they migrate from rural to rural areas, they're also constantly fluctuating from rural to urban and urban to rural back. Domestic workers are a key example. In many parts of Pakistan, domestic workers, women domestic workers, are actually rural women. Once there is wheat harvesting season, they will leave and go back to their villages, stay there for a month, and do the wheat harvesting so that they can have food security, and then they will come back to the urban areas looking for work once again. Similarly, construction workers, if there is road construction, if there is house building, if there is a bridge construction, farmers, landless farmers and agriculture workers will keep on jumping from one work to another. And that is what is the characteristic of the rural worker at this point. Why? Why is all this happening? So to me, the most critical aspect to understand are the new liberal policy framework that has been dictated in our lives in all the countries of South Asia, be it Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, or others. We know very well the key institutions are the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization, as well as bilateral and multilateral trade agencies, such as the USAID, the IBRD, of course, is multilateral, and there are others. But USAID, OSAID, European Union are the key drivers for looking for neoliberal policies and enforcement of these policies in our countries, which means we have no sovereignty. These policies basically are deregulation, privatization, and trade liberalization. These three are the key that have led to the state of affairs that I've described about with respect to hunger, with respect to joblessness, with respect to extreme loss of livelihood. We need to understand the extremely biased approach of the World Trade Organization and look at some of the basic differences between first and third world country producer, third world agriculture producers. And I'm going into this because the WTO is a key instrument in agriculture. It has a whole realm of instruments. The TRIPS agreement, the agreement on agriculture, the sanitary and phytosanitary measures, the technical barriers to trade, and I can go on. But I would like to focus on the agreements that I just talked about a bit, if I have the time, and to explain how these agreements have really kind of become tentacles that have ripped apart our rural communities. We need to understand the extremely biased approach of the WTO and look at the basic differences between first and third world agriculture producers. According to the US Department of Agriculture, the context of a small farmer in the US from the 1920s, from the 1980s to the 2000 was someone who had at least 250 acres of land, 250 acres of land. In 2015, 90% of the US farmers were small family operations with under $350,000 American dollars in annual gross cash farm income, a measure of revenue that includes sales of crops and livestock, government payments, and other farm-related income. Now, if we compare this to Indian farmers having an average landholding of 1 hectare, while the US farmers have an average landholding of 776 hectares. There are 2.1 million farms in the US employing less than 2% of the population, whereas in India, we have 1.3 billion people that depend on agriculture and do so for their livelihood. with the average annual income of per farm household from all sources at less than US 1,000. So you can imagine that in the US, the income is at least $18,000 to $19,000 per annum, whereas for us in Asia, especially in the rural areas, the income is less than $1,000. And I'm sure for Bangladesh, for Pakistan, for many of our countries, if we just look at the landless, it would not even come to that. Further, we know that for us, agriculture is a family, it's a family orientation. It is, according to the Committee on World Food Security, high-level panel of experts, the HLPE, describes small-scale agriculture as practiced by families, including one or more households, using only or mostly family labor and deriving from that work a large but variable share of the income in kind or in cash. Agriculture includes crop raising, animal husbandry, forestry, and artisanal fisheries. The holdings are run by family groups, a large portion of which are headed by women, and women play important roles in production, processing, and marketing activities. So I don't think any of us are blind to what family farming is in our parts of the world. We know very well that everybody, a child of 5 years old, also pitches in. If you talk to women in the cotton sector, when we ask them at what age did you start bringing your daughters in, they say as soon as they start working, as soon as they start walking, sorry. And so a 5-year-old kid, 6-year-old kid will go along with the mother and help her in picking cotton. And I think that is also very common for both India and Pakistan. So given this background of the WTO agreements and the IMF World Bank conditionalities, which I did not go into, but the IMF World Bank conditionalities are also hinged on the 3 neoliberal policies of deregulation, privatization, and trade liberalization. I will look into 3 sectors of Pakistan and try to showcase how it has impacted us in our daily lives, especially the landless women of Pakistan. Now, dairy sector is really based on landless families. Most of the animal, most of the livestock is bred by women who have no land, and they end up either leasing land or working on farmland where they can get fodder for their animals. Most of them, almost 100%, if not 80% of them, do not own livestock. They share the livestock with the owner. So they will rear the livestock, and in return, she gets one. If the cow has 2 animals, she gives birth to 2 offspring. One belongs to the caretaker and one belongs to the owner. The milk is kept by the rearing family. So that is the trend. I know for Pakistan, I'm sorry, I cannot say that for India. I don't know what the practices are in India, but for Pakistan across board, this is what is happening. Now, why do women really, really want livestock? Because they do not have land. And livestock increases in quantity. And livestock gives them food on a daily basis, cash income on a daily basis. If they are able to sell the milk, then some amount of milk they keep for their own nutrition, and some amount of milk is sold off as daily income needs of buying just small things like vegetables, or sometimes even atta, like flour. So, and then again, they say, if there is a tragedy, if there is a wedding, if we need to buy dowry for our daughters, that is what we do. We breed animals and we sell them off as time comes by and the need is there. So that is the basic asset of rural families. What the SPS, the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Agreement of the WTO, has done, it has stipulated that the dairy sector now cannot sell milk without pasteurization. They have standardized based on international standards of what should be the hygiene control over milk. Now, this is not pertaining to internal consumption of milk. This is only pertaining to trade-related aspects. For example, I will give you the example of the United States. in the 50 states of the US, people can drink raw milk. Every state allows their people to drink raw milk. Whereas now in Pakistan, where 90% of milk production is in the hands of small and landless farmers, they're saying you cannot sell milk unless it is pasteurized. So the this dictate is coming from the need to wrench control of the milk from the small and landless farmers to the big corporations. The corporations like Nestle, recently, about 2 years ago, there was a local company called Engro. It has been now bought by Friesland Campina, a Dutch cooperative, farmers cooperative, and they really just hated that the small farmers have 80% of the milk market. You know, and we all know, especially those of us who come from northern parts of well, I think all over our countries, that milk is not only milk. Milk is used to make butter, milk is used to make ghee, and then lassi. And so these are and during COVID, we went through so many communities, and they were saying the only reason we were able to escape hunger was that we had milk at home. If there was nothing else, we would make a chapati, we would make a roti, and give it to our children with a little bit of a glass of milk or half a glass of milk. There was not abundant food, but there was enough food that they did not go hungry. And so we know very well how critical livelihood is and livestock is, and how critical the dairy products from livestock are to our lives. The corporations now have mandated the World Trade Organization to make international standards of dairy, which is going to be sold in the market. The SPS agreement, the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Agreement, has allowed a body called Codex Alimentarius, which sits under the supervision of Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, and the WHO, World Health Organization. And the government of Pakistan has created an authority called the Pure Food Authority, which is now going around the country, destroying these big trucks of carrying milk in these dabbas. I think we all have the same kind of tradition. And they're testing it, doing samples and saying, oh, this is contaminated milk. This is bad milk. You have to throw it away. They literally dump thousands of liters of milk on the ground. And that is such a big criminal activity. In all our countries, we do not have safe water to drink. Especially the rural communities do not have safe water to drink. How come that a food which is so nourishing, which we are the civilization of Indus Valley civilization, the Harappa civilization, we have had livestock for thousands of years. We have drunk raw milk for thousands of years. How can they suddenly stipulate this on the people in a population which is suffering from hunger and malnutrition, especially women and children? So you see the extreme criminal minds of our governments under semi-colonial, semi-feudal relationships, where they are willing to destroy and take away food, rich food from our hands, just so that the corporations can take control of the livestock sector. At the same time, they're using the TRIPS agreement, the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. The Americans are bringing in cows, big fat cows from their countries, which eat 4 times the amount of food, the amount of fodder which our cows eat, whether it is the Sahiwal guy or the Cholistan guy or the DG Khan guy. And these cows cannot stand the heat of our countries. And hence many of them just die. They just cannot be able to maintain their bodies in the kind of environment, the climatic environment that there is in Pakistan, in our countries. And then at the same time, the Americans are also bringing in semen to for animal husbandry, for artificial insemination of the cows of the Pakistani indigenous varieties. And hence, so when we have these specialty animals, these animals will be under TRIPS, like the seeds that we have already lost across our regions, not only in South Asia, but across the world globally under the Green Revolution. Similar patterns of colonialism are being now employed in the livestock sector. And hence, what will happen? That women will not be able to keep animals. Already, The government officers are going around villages and saying, your lanes should look neat and clean. You should not have animals standing outside. What nonsense. In rural communities where you have not given us any transport, you have not given us electricity, you have not given us water, you have not given us schooling or health systems, you are telling us that we need to keep our lanes neat and clean? What is this? We have no land. Where will we keep our animals if not in the lanes outside our houses? So these are techniques, these are tools of controlling people's livelihood. And that is, there is a lot more information on this. Under the IMF conditionalities, the price of urea, fertilizer, pesticides, seeds has gone sky high. The small farmers just cannot produce anymore. They cannot afford the inputs. And due to Green Revolution, most of our seeds are gone. They don't have seed. They have to buy seed every year. And they cannot buy a 10,000 rupees bag of DAP, which is now critical for all of these hybrid seeds. So on one hand, they cannot produce. The second is they have no land. The third is they are being told that you have to meet with international standards to produce. And in the end, we will not produce anything. I'm just coming out of an FAO regional seminar. That's why I was late. I could not come out. I had to speak there. And there, the Palestinians, the Iraqis, the Lebanese were saying exactly the same thing, that they are not letting us produce. Why are we being fed by American wheat? Why are we being fed by Ukraine wheat, where we can produce wheat ourselves? Only if the IMF and the World Bank would just let us go, pull out their tentacles from our lives and our lands, we would be able to have sane lives. I will now go to cash crops. There's a lot more on milk, but I will just, because I want to really put across three areas. The second area is cash crops in general. I don't know if all of you know this or not, but the United States and the European government have stipulated that they have to have a certain percentage of ethanol in the fuel that they put into their vehicles, in their cars and their luxury cars and whatever they drive. 10%, I think, of ethanol. Where is this ethanol going to come from? Ethanol is produced from maize. It's also produced in some parts of the world from rice and wheat, but maize and sugarcane are two crops that are very, very favorites for producing ethanol. The land under sugarcane is increasing immensely. And we are a country which is scarce in water. With the kind of disputes we have between India and Pakistan, the amount of water which we are getting now is very little. And then with the climate change, the glaciers are melting at a very fast rate. Can we afford to grow a crop such as sugarcane, which guzzles up water? It stands for one whole year. When a sugarcane stands for one whole year, it means that no other crop can be grown. So wheat will not be grown, which is the staple food of our people. If we do not grow wheat, what's going to happen? So wheat is out of the whole system of thinking that we need to be food sufficient. On the other hand, they're increasing more and more and more land to sugarcane. Now they're making the women and the men, the landless, come and work and cut cane and load cane. Cutting cane is without wages. You cut cane and they will give you fodder. So the women, because they are landless and they have animals, they will go and cut cane from early morning, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning till sunset, which is about 6 o'clock nowadays. And it is very, very exhausting work. You know, cane is very hard. And then the supervisors from the feudals are standing on the head saying, cut from the very low of the cane, because they don't want it to be wasted. And so there are all kinds of penalties are on these women for not being able to produce accordingly. Hence, vast areas of landless people and agriculture workers are cutting cane across the year. Cane only is cut for 3 months, or actually maybe 3, 2 to 3 months is all that cane is harvested. For the rest of the 9 months, it's just standing there guzzling up water, and there is no labor and there is no food. And hence, this flow of rural women from all these areas into cities like Karachi and Lahore, where they work during the months because they have no work at home and they have no food. And when I ask these domestic workers, why do you leave such beautiful areas and come to Karachi where it is so noisy, it is so, and they live in squatter settlements? They say, at least we get something to eat here. We can take back leftover food from your kitchens to feed our kids. In Muzaffargarh, just 2 days ago, 3 days ago, we were in the farmlands and workers were saying, if somebody would give us one meal a day, we would just work for that. It's amazing for us in Pakistan to come across that kind of data. It's just amazing. It's unbelievable. And so sugarcane, maize, also same thing, biodiesel. They are now growing a lot of maize because maize is also used as livestock fodder. And they want to feed the fodder maize because then maize gives, you know what, bigger droppings of dung, animal dung. And animal dung is now being recycled as biodiesel. So it's a assembly line product that they have created. By the way, the foreign cattle which is coming from USA does not have animal dung. It just throws out diarrhea-like dung. And women say, we can do nothing with that. And why is dung, animal dung, so critical to rural women? Because that is their source of energy. With all this stuff about don't cut wood, don't cut wood, don't cut wood, although we will have really beautiful furniture in our homes of the very rich, not only in the rich parts of the world, but also in Asia, these women who just need wood for energy, it is now really cold weather in Punjab and there was no wood. How do they live through these cold winters when they have no source of warmth in their homes? Secondly, wood is needed to cook food. How else would you cook food? In the forest areas of Pakistan, in the upper hills of Pakistan, they are now literally throwing out people from the forest land saying, these people are cutting up trees. They have lived there for years and years, centuries. They have every right to take wood from those woods, and they don't cut the whole tree. They just take minimal things which they need for their daily use. Not like the timber mafia, which will cut the whole damn tree and it is sold for very big sums in our cities. So it goes on, but I will just stop here with respect to dairy. Cash crop, I really wanted to say that if you are growing strawberry, if you are growing sugarcane, you're growing maize, there is no food. None of this is food. These are all export cash crops or urban elite food crops, delicacies. Who will eat strawberry 3 times a day? I mean, nonsense. Then I come to potato. This we just stumbled upon in the past week. The Pepsi Cola has a number of brand potato chips. One is Lay's, and then they have something called Kurukure or something like that. And they have a number of products which they're all brand potato brands. They have come out with a new policy. I'm forgetting the name now. New agriculture generative policy or something of 2030, where they have said, we will grow potato on 7 million hectares of land in 28 countries. Growing what? Potatoes. For what? Lay's chips. And Lay's chips is extremely dangerous for our kids. It is first of all very expensive, and the children don't understand that it really eats away the household income on all kinds of trash food. Secondly, it means that the kids are eating just carbohydrates with very high salt. If you go to our hospitals across the world, the hospitals are just overflowing with people who are sick. What does that mean? I don't want to get into the COVID debate right now, but where has COVID come from? What is COVID? It really needs to be politicized. That how come that we have to deal with the pandemic And then the the whole TRIPS agenda of not allowing vaccines to be produced in our country. So it's interrelated. I don't want to go into it, but just want to connect the TRIPS agreement to the seeds, to the animals, and then to the health sector. And of course, the rural women are the worst affected because they are very superstitious about getting injection jabs into their arms. There's so much conspiracy going around that every time you go to them and say, please get the jab, they are very afraid. They're very afraid. They don't know what is going to happen to them. With respect to potato, it is only 1 month of work, at the most 40 days of work, and women get less than $2 a day. Now, the problem with potato is once you have potato sown, you cannot have wheat again. So this is the third critical cash crop that is taking away land from wheat. With wheat, as I said before, when women cut wheat, they get paid in kind. So they have food security at home. They will do so much work during the wheat harvesting just to get the wheat stored as grains at home, which they can use gradually over the year. If they get paid in cash, first of all, there's patriarchy. South Asia, one of the most patriarchal regions of the world, the income goes into the hands of the men. Second, with the extreme heightened prices in food, what can they get out of that 400 rupees per day just for 40 days? Nothing. And so within a month and a half, 2 months, 3 months, they have scarce food at home. And what they're doing is, the second issue is TRIPS agreement. The potato seeds are all under intellectual property rights. And so the farmers have no access to the seed. The Pepsi Cola supervisors come, hand them over the seed, make sure they get all the product back to their storehouses, and the farmers are left with no seed. They are not allowed to save the seed. They are not allowed to re-sow the seed. So the farmers just cannot do the potato crop on their own. Secondly, it is such an expensive crop to grow that the small farmers, the 1 acre, 2 acre farmers, just cannot do it. Same with sugarcane. The small farmers cannot grow sugarcane. And if you are a sharecropper, which means you are supposed to work on some landlord's land, the amount of money which comes back from sharecropping, because you go and sell the cane to sugar mills, the sugar mills pay in checks. The check comes to the owner of the land, not to the sharecropper. Hence, the sharecropper doesn't ever know how much was he paid. You see, the pattern of destitution just keeps on and on and on. And lastly, I don't know how much time I've got left. I'm very sorry if I've overplayed my time. Lastly, I would like to come to the issue of crisis. Well, maybe first of all, infrastructure. Infrastructure development knows no bound in our countries. Whether it is the Chinese, whether it is the Americans, whoever it is, they all want to lay out big infrastructure projects. Everybody wants to be connected to the port, whether it is the Sri Lankan port, whether it is the Pakistani ports, or the Chabahar, which the Indians were building before the Americans just, told them to get out of Iran. And the ports are all for trade. Now, when you build massive infrastructure, roads and networks to connect yourselves to the ports, like the colonial era of India and Pakistan, of the undivided subcontinent, we know very well that these tracks of roads and networks go through people's lands. I will just share with you one example. There's something called the Northern Bypass, which was built in Peshawar. It is partly funded by the Asian Development Bank, and it was meant to give the Americans access to Afghanistan and to Central Asia, and on the other hand, also connect with the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor Infrastructure Program. And there's a community with which a farmers resistance group is working. Those farmers were landless farmers working on a big landlord's land. When the Northern Bypass was being built, the government of Pakistan paid the landlord for the land that was being utilized in the bridge that was being laid down there. The landless were just told to move themselves. And the landless said, no, we've been here for 150 years. We are part of that land. And we also need either to get land as you got it, or we need to be compensated. Those people, less than a handful of maybe 50 households, constant round of FIRs, like police reports, getting thrown into jail, coming out of jail, going back to jail, coming out of jail. Those people had a lot of livestock. They have sold all their livestock now just so that they can fight the court case. We went and talked to the women there asking, how is it impacting you? They said, we have now no cow dung. We have no animal dung. We don't know how to cook our food. We have no milk. Milk in the market is very expensive. We cannot afford to buy the milk. And we have no livestock with which to get the milk. The men are either working as daily workers elsewhere in the town, or are fighting the case. And this is a story which is repeated across our countries. If we go and work with the people who have been displaced because of the land grabbing that is happening, it is all again tied to international trade. It's not tied to resilient, self-sufficient food production systems in our own countries. I just remembered, and I really want to talk about protracted crisis. What is protracted crisis? It is as it is in India, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh. These are regions where our governments and international governments have been constantly playing out different kinds of conflicts, making people IDPs, internally displaced persons. Now, what has that to do with food and agriculture? Number one, they do not allow you to grow tall crops like maize, or even maize especially. In the northern areas, the food product of the people there is maize. They eat makai ki roti, as you know. And so with no maize, they really have very meager sources of food, because they can't grow wheat because it's so cold out there. Most of them will then grow wheat, whether it is Kashmir or whether it is northern areas of Pakistan. So one is that they cannot do that. Second, due to curfew, they could not bring out the livestock. They cannot go out to cut fodder for the livestock, and they had to kill their livestock. We visited many communities. They literally had to kill their livestock because they had no food to feed the livestock. And you know, once you have killed that source of income, you cannot actually buy another one. It is very hard to replace a herd again very quickly. It takes time. Of course, it can be done, but it's a very long process. In addition, you know, when women go from one place to another, they migrate, they become refugees. What happens? They are extremely harassed. They're sexually very, very vulnerable. They face violence not only from the male household members themselves, but everybody in the environment. Many of the young girls are immediately married off so that they are not left at home. These are just some of the issues that we have looked at. But to me, another really big issue is of the food aid which is dumped into our areas when there is protracted crisis. They will take away our productive means for growing our own food, number one, and then they will bring in really low quality food aid from their countries, which is actually surplus production, very poor quality surplus production, and they'll dump into our countries. A major problem is therapeutic foods, the micronutrient food supplies. They are genetically produced, and they're also externally mixed into our atta and ghee and so on. 7 corporations control the micronutrient therapeutic foods, micronutrient foods across the world. 7 corporations, 6 of them are Americans, 1 is Swiss, Nestle. What is happening? You know, even when there is a humanitarian crisis, they only look for opportunities to get into our systems and use that to get hold of our territories, of our people, of our livelihood. So I will just stop there, and finally, I would like to say that the most viable framework to fight against neocolonialism, to fight against this kind of semi-feudalism, is to stand on food sovereignty, which is a set of principles. Number one, that we, the farmers, the producers, have the right to all productive resources, whether it be land, whether it be seed, whether it be forests, whether it be water. And so we, the rural people, will claim our rights to our productive resources. Secondly, it is also based on the principle of right to food. Everybody has a right to adequate, nourishing, culturally appropriate food. We in Pakistan, we either eat rice or wheat or makai. Those are the three staples that we know in Pakistan. Why are we forced to eat noodles? Why are they trying to change our culture from eating whatever we were eating to something else? And that is again very rampant across the regions, not only in South Asia but across. So right to food, right to land, especially women. Women must have entitlement to lands. And then no to imperialism. We have the right to fight for our lands. We take that right to fight for our rights. That is the slogan that we use across. And I think what is very attractive about food sovereignty is it unites the workers and the farmers and the agri-workers of across the globe. These are similar situations, whether it is India or Pakistan, South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Arab world, the Africans, the Latin Americans, no matter whom. The semi-colonial, the semi-feudal framework under which the Western world is now operating, or the imperialist countries, whether it be Russia or China or the United States or the European countries, that is the framework they are using. They want to take control of various parts of the world and use it as their territory. And that is the resistance that will come. So it's not only agriculture that we're talking about, we're really talking about the sovereignty of the people. And to me, there is nothing more important than to fight for food sovereignty and for our sovereignty of the lands. There are certain recommendations which I just gave to FAO also. I'll just read them out here. Implement food sovereignty framework for sustainable agriculture and sustainable development. Advocate food systems based on self-reliance and prohibit imperialist policies in food and agriculture. Equitable land distribution with emphasis on land entitlements in women's names. Advocate government policies that protect women's right to land and livestock, as well as decent livelihood. Immediate stop to land grabbing and land evictions in our region. Promote and implement agroecology. I did not talk about that much, but agroecology is also a key factor of food sovereignty. Protect and promote indigenous seeds as well as indigenous livestock, and promote food crops instead of cash crops. I end with that. Thank you very much.